Welcome to the African News Review podcast, where we cut through the noise and get to the truth. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and each week we are here to challenge the biases, prejudices, and misinformation in the Western press about Africa. Using historical context and contemporary insights, we set the record straight and reclaim the narrative. Tune in every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we uncover the real stories and reshape the conversations about Africa. This is the African News Review podcast, reclaiming Africa's narrative, one story at a time. Yes, greetings, and welcome to African News Review. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, as usual. And with me, back from travels from Kemet, otherwise known as Egypt, is my sister from another mother, host, Rethinking Freedom, Aya Fubara, Eneli Esquire. Welcome back, sister.
Thank you.
And a household name, a legend in himself, a journalist and broadcaster, Black Star News, author, manufacturing hates, a comrade Milton Allimadi. Welcome.
Yes. So I hear some background noise. I'm going to try my headphones to see if it blocks it out.
Okay. So we're good? So yes.
Yeah, you can continue.
Okay, so welcome back, sister. And a new tradition now is, could you give us the news where you're at to get us moving?
Well, today I happen to be broadcasting from Cambridge, Massachusetts, not too far from Harvard University, where a local bookstore had not apparently heard of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. I was calling to get another copy of her book, and they seemed really surprised. But, the news across the United States and Brother Milton might be able to fill us in a little bit more, is that we are very swiftly marching down the path to authoritarianism in the United States of America. Of course, in Texas, the House has passed their racist map that is specifically designed to make sure that not only do they get 5 more quote-unquote Republican seats, but actually that they get people like Jasmine Crockett out of office, Al Green, people who have been outspoken, who are progressives, who are fighting for the humanity of us all. And it's now going through the Senate. I was listening briefly to the Senate hearings. It's a foregone conclusion. They're going to pass it. And until it's passed and the governor signs off on it, which he's going to, because he got a call from Trump telling him to get 5 more seats, just like Georgia got a call saying get 11,000 plus more votes. Luckily, they said no. But once he signs it, then it's going to start going through the court system. But I have very little hope that is going to stop anything, because the Supreme Court in Texas has sided with Trump and with MAGA repeatedly, and we know that the Supreme Court of the land is also doing the same. So these are dire times, and in the meantime, Trump is also playing games with people's lives, activating the National Guard to go into cities. They started with Washington, D.C. Well, they started in California, we know, and then Washington, D.C. He has promised to send guards into Chicago and to mostly Black and browns, actually all Black and brown cities. They're not looking at rural America or cities that are predominantly white. This is a serious encroachment on our rights as people. And when he said, vote for me this one time and you will not have to vote again, people took that as hyperbole. He was just talking. He didn't mean much by it. But we shall see if we actually have midterm elections in 2026, if they have not figured out how to gerrymander everything so that, like in other countries where you have authoritarian governments, it's pretty much one party rule, and you go in and you get 97, 98% of the vote and no one asks any questions. Brother Milton, I don't know what's going on in your neck of the woods. I heard they have checkpoints and things now in D.C. for you criminals.
Yeah. The only interesting thing is, where is the resistance going to come from? Because you have, the Democratic establishment wanting to be Republican light, and that is the whole issue. I think before the midterms or right about the midterms or after, we're going to see some major shift in the democratic establishment because that's the only solution. The so-called the disparaging. Okay, so they keep disparaging them as the extreme left. Well, people are voting for them. Call him whatever you want to call him. People are voting for Mamdani, and people are contributing money to his campaign. So, it's either going to be you waking up and saying we have to restructure what we've been calling the Democratic Party into the new reality, or you're going to have your sort of internal shift, coup d'etat or something like that within the establishment. Because not only are people voting for, and to me, the good barometer and test is Mamdani. The newly released campaign financing, he raised $1 million. He raised double the amount of the establishment candidate, Cuomo, a former governor. Cuomo raised just under 500,000. This guy raised $1 million. So the people are speaking loudly, regardless of what the leadership are saying. Whether Hakeem Jeffries wants to endorse this extreme leftist or not, or whether the governor Hochul wants to endorse this extreme leftist or not, or whether Schumer wants to endorse him or not, the people are really taking action by their own votes and with their own money. So if the people are involved in resistance, then I have hope. If we are to be led by the current crop of leadership on top of the democratic establishment, then there's no hope.
Wow. Okay, that said, the news from here is on Tuesday morning, we woke up to Sky News giving us a breaking news that the United Nations has declared famine in Gaza, which means 2 people will be dying every day. 2 of 10,000 people will be dying every day. That is what is considered a famine. But what the headline left out was, it was a man-made famine. So again, that is what we do here, is we pass the headlines to understand that sometimes what you hear is not actually what is intended or what is being covered up. So in this case, we have a problem with regards to the establishment now basically just running around trying to understand how to respond to that news, knowing fully well that sooner or later, when the pictures start coming out, they are coming out in trickles at the moment. Well, once that trickle becomes a flood, it will be difficult for people to hide the fact that they've been complicit in it because they've been warned for a very long time. So, that said, we go to the first story for today, and it's coming from the good comrade's most favorite leader, or dear leader, as we will say, is from The Guardian. It reads,
the most useless African.
Uganda reaches agreement with U.S. to take in some failed asylum seekers. The lead says, African countries' foreign ministry says the 2 states are working on the details of a deal over deportees. There's the great man himself. Uganda has reached an agreement with the U.S. to take in deportees from third countries who may not get asylum or are reluctant to go back to their own countries, according to Uganda Foreign Ministry. The country will not accept people with criminal records or unaccompanied minors under the temporary arrangement, the Foreign Ministry Permanent Secretary said in a statement. He did not say whether Uganda was receiving any payment or other benefits or how many deportees it will accept. Your initial thought.
Okay, you want me to go first?
Yes, please.
This to me is and I know in another show we discussed South Sudan, right?
Yes, we did.
It's the risk that these fictitious countries in Africa present to the entire security of African people generally,
Okay.
Because something like this obviously is not even voted in parliament, right? So you have an absolute monarch / dictator who just thinks what is in my best interest. And that's what the decision is based on. Same thing in South Sudan. When they accepted, how many? 6?
6.
I think. in July. Same thing in Eswatini,
Yeah.
formerly Swaziland. Same thing in Rwanda. This is a Kagame decision, not a decision by
The people.
the Rwandan people or Rwandan government or parliament. The same thing we have in Uganda. This is one of the most neo-colonial leaders we have in Africa. Very tragic. This is the only, Mobutu and even Amin, these were really wicked dictators. But strangely, in their own peculiar way, they actually loved Africa. This is a guy who, during his first term, Trump said, the S word to refer to African countries and Haiti. And people who are not familiar, and sometimes, I see people praising him online for standing up to the words and not allowing them to do anything when he says, oh, we're going to go after LGBTQ in Uganda. Yes, this is an African standing up. So they try to portray him as pro-African. These are people that don't realize that when Trump used the S word, he said, I love Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And people can go and Google and look at the headline and read the articles, right?
Yeah.
This is a guy and he plays all sides. So when the Republicans are in power, boom, fully in bed with them. Democrats fully in bed with them. So in 1994, because he's been there 40 years now, his transgressions go way back. In an interview with Atlantic Monthly Magazine, he said, I've never blamed the white man for taking slaves from African countries. If you're stupid, you should be taken a slave. I've never blamed the white man for colonizing Africa. I don't even know how many Africans are aware of these things that he says, right? So this is just, par for the course. This is consistent with his behavior. And why is he doing this now? Because Uganda has elections in January. I think it's January 26, 2026. And he knows that after he steals the election, there could be some strong statements. There's never any action, just strong statements from the so-called Western countries. So now he wants to neuter the possible reaction by the United States, because now Trump would say, oh, this is our guy. He's going to be taking anybody we kick out. Let him do whatever he wants.
He's a good man.
If he wants to steal election and then lock up Bobby Wine, so be it. My only hope is that people come out to the streets like they've been coming out in Ivory Coast, like they did in Senegal, and finally drive this dictator out of power. So that's my reaction to this. But it's very tragic because now Kilma, Abrego, Garcia, they're telling him that if he does not plead guilty on Monday, they're going to send him to Uganda.
Yes, that is exactly right. So, as we look at this, first of all, they said, thank you, Comrade Milton, for laying all the backgrounds that people should at least get started with in terms of understanding who these players are.
Right.
So when you look at the exclusions supposedly in this agreement, and they said including those with criminal records and unaccompanied minors, just from a human rights perspective, first and foremost. So the United States of America, the land of the free, home of the brave, all of that is deporting unaccompanied minors. Think about that. The fact that was language included. So you're telling me that there are people under 18 who are being sent out of this country without any adult supervision to places where there's no oversight in terms of what happens to them. And yet we're talking about issues with human sex trafficking and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's just one. And then they said exclusions include those with criminal records. Well, then how is Abrego Garcia part of this conversation? So these guys are playing in our faces.
Absolutely.
On
Propaganda.
so many different levels. And so here's the thing. In the interest of transparency, why don't you show us the entire memorandum of understanding?
Exactly.
Let's understand who got paid what. Let's understand what is being promised and to whom. And let's understand what is the social cost for these African countries. I mean, with our own issues, how is it that Africa is going to become the solution to rich countries and their issues with quote unquote migration, which by the way, it's their policies that are driving migration anyway to their countries. And are we going to make African countries detention archipelagos now? So whoever you don't want, you just dump on us? And what does that mean in terms of sovereignty for African nations? What does that mean for our own people? And so on so many levels, we should be concerned about the strong arming of an increasing number of African nations, these leaders. And of course, like Comrade Milton pointed out, the people aren't getting to vote on this. They are not saying we want this. These are just unilateral decisions being made by a couple of people at the top. And I don't know where our judicial systems are across the African continent. And I don't know why the AU is not coming out and making a very specific statement against this kind of actions taking place. But it's very problematic.
Right. No, it's a ugly issue, and it confirms what Nkrumah really said. Unless you unite, you will never be able to exercise your sovereignty. There's no sovereignty at all here. And obviously, this press release or statement from the Ugandan ministry it has no relevance at all. Because if the United States says, this is the people we want you to take, they'll take it. They'll take the people the U.S. are going to be shipping. They'll be brought in the middle of night. You won't know who was sent there, right? It's not like they're going to be allowed to make a statement once they get to Uganda. This is who I am. This is why it was shifted. And it's going to be, well, the Kilmar case is getting a lot of publicity. So I want to really see if they can actually deport him to Uganda, because this is going to be followed by media. I can see like 50 journalists from different parts of major media around the world going to Uganda to see what happens to this case. So this is going to be a good test.
And
in terms of the African Union, unfortunately,
Go ahead.
The African Union, the budget, 60% comes from outside. So I think the African Union has already been told, this one we don't want you to make a statement about.
Just taking a quick break here on the African News Review podcast, but don't go anywhere. If you're enjoying our deep dive into the real stories behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern, we're here to debunk the myths and bring you the truth about Africa. Want to help spread the word? Share this podcast with your friends and leave us a review. It goes a long way in helping others discover the real Africa. Without further ado, let's get back to setting the record straight.
Goodness. You know, the other thing that just comes to mind is, who is the current Secretary of State for the United States of America? Marco Rubio, whose own family.
Yeah. It's just ironic.
Immigrants themselves.
In a tragic way.
And so the absolute dissonance, you know, the cruelty of it all, the understanding that this could have been your own people, in the future will be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All because you want power. You absolutely abdicate any kind of ethics, morality, humanity. These people are beyond evil. And African leaders are playing into it.
Yes. I mean, to even buttress the point with regards to Museveni. Museveni wrote a book in 1992 titled The Problem with Africa. Chapter 2 says one of the key problems with Africa is presidents stay too long in power. Talk about being a hypocrite. But, I mean, back to this story itself. Museveni does have form. He was party to the receiving of deportees from Israel, Sudanese, and
Eritreans.
Exactly. So it's just the basics of, this is the next gig in town. I might as well get on board with it and see how far I can, get. And so, a side note on the issue of Uganda. In the course of the week, there was also talks about a certain judge on the ICC, Subitende, who said it was her moral duty to protect Israel. That statement would have gone on fairly beyond most people's thinking. But the fact that the former president of the International Court of Justice stepped down in January, and she by far is the highest, she's the acting president of the International Criminal Court, makes her position now very, very precarious in terms of the Gaza situation. Not that she can obviously overturn the actions of the court, but her argument can, sway the decision. So my question to you is, both of you, I'll start with the sister. What do you think the world should be doing now with regards to her position on the matter in view of her position as the acting judge, president of the International Criminal Court?
As an attorney, one of the things I would say is that I laugh only because I almost didn't practice law. I actually graduated from law school and did not practice for a while, came back to the practice, had to leave again. I used to call myself a recovering attorney, and I've come back to the practice of law. One of the things that was most debilitating for me as a first-year law student was the fact that I had gone into law school with the sense of law is where you go to bring about social justice. It's about equality. It's about making things fair for everybody. And by the second lecture I had my first day of law school, I was so disillusioned. And I was like, what Kool-Aid had I been drinking to believe that any legal system, modern legal system, because it wasn't always that way in ancient Africa, but what Kool-Aid had I been drinking to believe that these modern forms of law were ever designed to do anything but maintain the status quo? And so I think that one of the lessons from whether it's the International Court of Justice, whether it's the Supreme Court here in the United States, whether you are, you've been pulled over for a traffic ticket, is that modern judicial systems are not about social justice. They are not about fairness. They are not about equity. They are about maintaining power. And so what that informs me as an individual is that we as individuals who care have to stop abdicating our power to these entities and assuming that they will do what's right and just. We have to be advocates of ourselves and of others. We have to speak up. We have to use every platform we have. And when we need to put our bodies on the line, we should be willing to do so, because nobody, especially these bodies, are coming to save us. So the truth of the matter is that in the history of the ICJ, what have they accomplished? Besides going after, quote unquote, third world despots, what have they done? Putin just waltzed into the United States of America and had a very public meeting that was covered by world media. Has he not been charged as a war criminal? Netanyahu is doing whatever he wants to. So there's no teeth behind this. There's no willpower behind this. So this woman who wants to go down in infamy as supporting the genocide of Palestinians, which once that happens, and as it's happening, also means that any other marginalized group is fair game.
Yeah.
No one's going to speak up for them either, including her. If that's how she wants to go down in infamy, she's not going to be the first and she's not going to be the last either. She's not the first. She's not going to be the last. I don't put any credence in it. We as individuals need to keep educating ourselves and fighting where we can in whatever ways we can. And at this point, that also includes calling her out for the absolute despot that she is.
All right,
Milton?
So, this woman is in a uniquely precarious position. When she voted against the South African lawsuit,
yeah,
I launched a petition to have her removed from the court on change.org. I think it got a couple of hundred signatures, but then the momentum died. So hopefully this is another time for people to go back and check that petition. But I sort of feel, it's tough. She has family in Uganda, lots of family in Uganda. She has relatives in Uganda. When she voted against the South African lawsuit, I'm convinced she was voting Museveni's position. Even though Uganda came out and issued a
Immediately.
statement saying this is her own personal position, trying to distance, saying, but said this is her own position, but didn't officially say Uganda denounces this position. Because Museveni, wants to have a good relationship with Israel. He gets a lot of weapons from Israel, a lot of surveillance equipment from Israel, and training for his intelligence services as well. So he wants to have his cake and eat it too. So this woman making a statement like this is actually something coordinated through the Museveni apparatus. And then Uganda, on this occasion, came out and denounced her position, even though that's exactly what Museveni wants her to say.
Okay.
He's mastered the art of Machiavellian politics, you see? And for her, she cannot come out and say, this is outrageous. How would a sane human being be making these statements or even voting like that? But she can't. They don't have to tell her directly. All they need to do is maybe have one of her relatives who has not spoken with her for a long time, call her on the phone and say, how are you doing, Auntie? Okay, I just wanted to check and hang up. You see?
So you're saying that she might be held hostage?
Oh, absolutely. 100% hostage. And that's part of the problem.
Here's the thing, though, brother Milton.
Mm-hmm.
Any one of us right now is in a position where we can be held hostage.
I agree with you.
But the issue is your acquiescing doesn't save you or
It does
anyone.
not. Okay, thank you for saying that. It does not save her.
So we all need to be clear about that. And I say that
it will
knowing
not
that
save
the
her
FBI
ultimately.
is probably monitoring this. But Zora Neale Hurston said one time that if
we on the
they
same
see you
page.
and you're silent, that they will say you liked the killing, basically.
We on the same page. She is on the bed that she made for herself. She worked with the Museveni regime. That is how ultimately she kept getting, into the system, and then got into the UN system, and then made it all the way there. So, but I'm just explaining how I believe it's working right now, because otherwise people are saying this does not make sense. It does not make sense, except there's a mechanism behind it. And I'm not expressing any sympathy for her at all.
Okay. Speaking of that, we stay in East Africa and for our next story, we go to the AP and it's Rwanda. So it says Rwanda-backed group M23 denies role in Congo's massacre. The lead reads, the Rwandan-backed rebel group M23 has denied involvement in a series of massacres Eastern Congo, which were detailed in a published report by the rights group on Wednesday. So the spokesman for the M23 military called the Human Rights Watch report fake and a fabrication of reality and accused the group of spreading extremist propaganda in a statement on Wednesday. There's a part here that strikes me as odd. The headline says Rwanda. It speaks about Rwandan-backed rebel M23. But in here, it says both M23 and the Congolese military have previously been accused of violence against civilians. Early this year, Congolese accused M23 of extrajudicial killings during its seizure of major cities. Then he goes on again to buttress the point here, where it says a separate report by another group, Amnesty International, also published Wednesday, found that both M23 and Congolese government-controlled sponsored militias regularly commit mass atrocities and sexual violence against civilians. Then he ends with this, where is it? There is a bit there where he says, essentially that is the take. But I'm curious to know what you guys think about the story and the way it's laid out.
All right.
Sister, you want to go first?
I'm telling you. These stories. So, okay, I'm going to put two things together here. Here in the United States, it's all about ICE, the weaponization of ICE, and how ICE is going into homes, into places of worship, into workplaces, where baseball fields, wherever, to quote unquote apprehend people, right? And the idea is that people are here illegally and they're working illegally. What I've been waiting for, and I have not yet seen, is any arrests made of the employers of these so-called illegal migrants who are working, right? Because if they're working for someone is benefiting. So if it's against the law to be an illegal, to work here, to be here illegally and to work, how come there are only certain people who are being arrested and there are other people who are not being arrested? Kind of like with prostitution. If you arrest the quote unquote prostitute, but you're not arresting the pimps and you're not arresting the quote unquote Johns. So when we look at Congo, let me bring it back together because people are like, how did she get off to that? When you bring it back to what's happening in the Congo, my question is, where are all of these, whether you want to call them M23 or you want to call them the Congolese militia or whatever, the military, where are all of these groups? Because they're saying there are over 100 groups, armed groups. Where are they getting their weapons from? How are they affording these weapons and ammunition, which is not cheap? I'm a gun owner. Ammunition is not cheap. Where are the regional sanctions on the traders? Where is the joint border monitoring? Who is tracking what is leaving Congo and how the resources are moving and the funding of these different groups? Where is the prosecution of command responsibility beyond all of the press releases? And so for me, in the midst of hopefully also putting a spotlight on the absolute despair of the people of Congo, can you imagine living in this area? When we just use the word, oh, there are rapes happening. Do you understand the devastation?
Yeah.
Do we understand when we just say, oh, massacres? You know, like, can we quantify what this looks like and qualify it for the people living there, for the absolute lack of safety? And yet all we have are these press releases and this commentary. And again, and I know what you're going to say, Comrade Allimadi, where is the AU when we are coming to the United States to sit at the feet of a felon to quote unquote broker peace because he's trying to get the Nobel Peace Prize, when we're waiting on Qatar to talk to quote unquote the M23 rebels and broker peace? Where are our own leaders? Where is our love for our own humanity? And I think that a lot of this also ties into the fact that we are not teaching history in our schools. And we don't understand, many of us, the roles that we are playing in our own little but really significant ways in continuing the oppression of our own people. So this story about M23 denies role in Eastern Congo massacres, like what are they supposed to say? But to the fact that you can even, that there is a command for M23, but they are still able to walk around for the most part free, it's probably like, who has access to them? Who's interviewing them? And why is not something more drastic being done to prevent the massacre of these people? Because there are no people here. These are brutes. We are not human beings. So we talk about the people of Congo as though they are inanimate objects. Let me stop there.
All right. So this story is very bad for Rwanda, actually. First of all, you have the headline in bold fonts stating Rwanda backed. You know, remember we had a whole show on that a couple of months ago. So that, number one, is very bad for Rwanda. Then number two, M23 denying when they used to gloat and take responsibility for these killings. And now they want the world to know that they're denying it. That's also another bad sign for Rwanda. Because ultimately, M23 is Rwanda, right? And the Rwanda's corporate supporters. And then the lead of the story is actually buried at the very, very end. And you pointed out some points where the article is saying the Congolese backed militia of Congo and M23. So AP is trying to do some massaging on behalf of Rwanda.
Yeah.
But the real story is buried one of the very last sections where it says the Bureau of African Affairs wants to take this to the UN Security Council. Because obviously, why is Kagame concerned now? Because now your foreign minister signed an agreement at the house where right now resides one of the most erratic presidents of this country. So obviously Kagame is concerned. How might this guy react? Wait a minute. You're sending your foreign minister all the way here. They stood next to me. They signed this thing. And now I'm getting news that, the people you back are still causing havoc. So that's why they wanted everybody to know that we had nothing to do with it, right? Because they fear the possible consequences. And the lead is buried because if they take this to the Security Council, as the U.S. is now saying, they might decide to do something about it. And then you as Rwanda, how are you going to stand up to the Security Council and the U.S.? And that is why they had that part massaging, trying to, you notice they never tried to get a quote from a Congolese government official. Think about it. You're quoting two different M23 officials, but not saying, let me call Congo's foreign minister. Yeah.
So, Brother Milton, I have a question for you. Kagame has been the,
darling,
golden boy of the West for some time. Who did he piss off lately? Because it looks like they're about to do a Saddam Hussein on him.
Okay. Actually, that is a good question, and that's what I have not figured out. But that is worth exploring further. Something has happened. You're right.
Yeah.
And that's something we all need to
He
explore.
got too big for his britches.
Right. Explore independently and come back for another show of that. I hadn't even, Yeah, he touched some red line.
Okay, so there is a question I did scribble down, and which is, we constantly talk about the M23 and what have you. And the good sister mentioned the question, that what's the AU role? I suppose the question, a more pertinent question would be, now you have militias just basically in a very tight spot. You have 100 militias. At some point,
that's what they say. We don't know that. That could be.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Right.
Yes.
As the sister pointed out,
who's
that could
counting?
be.
Who knows all these people?
Right. Sometimes this is something they pick from our earlier story and just copy and paste in the next article. And then it becomes a fact, you see. But I don't think it's possible to have 100 independent, separate militias there. That doesn't even make sense factually. 10 maybe, okay, possible, right? Go ahead.
So we don't have 100 franchises running around with guns.
Yeah, I can't believe that.
Okay. So that said, we go to, again, The Economist for the next story, and which reads, Race, Power, and Money in South Africa. And it says, the lead says, the staggering cost of Black economic empowerment. I want you to remember that. The staggering cost of Black economic empowerment. The cost to whom? But the story says, after the end of apartheid, South Africa embarked upon one of the most extensive attempts to redress racial inequality. At the center of this effort is Black economic empowerment, otherwise known as B, a set of policies that in effect mandates firms to sell discounted assets to Black investors, hire more Black managers, procure more from Black suppliers, but the flagship scheme of the African National Congress, the party in charge since 1994, is being questioned like never before. The Trump administration cites B as a reason it is imposing 30% tariffs on the country. Inside South Africa, there is a growing concern that these policies, while perhaps necessary at first, are no longer fit for purpose. B has mostly benefited a tiny elite while restraining economic growth, undermining the social stability it was meant to underpin. Quite a lot there.
Yeah. You mean, basically a lot of propaganda, because the article makes a very strong case for why Black economic empowerment needs to be expanded by the empirical evidence that it presents. But it comes out with the exact opposite conclusion, that it's bad and it needs to be abolished. And what are some of the evidence that it uses? That between 1993 and 2019, 10% of the wealthiest Black, their income or wealth triple, whereas the bottom 50%, their income collapse. So that to them is the evidence, number one. Number two, that now there's been some shift. You have 75% of senior management positions in public companies are now Black. And then it says in the private sector, it's only 15%. But all that's because perhaps the country is not yet having an education system capable of producing enough skilled workers to take those positions. Okay. So it's saying, number one, it's okay for those public companies to hire Black people who know nothing, have no skills, and that's why they're hired in those positions. But the private, they're not hired because of that. They're not saying perhaps it's because of the racism that this policy is meant to address. And it's been so ineffective that only 15% of the private companies have senior Blacks in their management positions. And of course, we know who owns most of these private companies, right?
Yes.
And then regarding the argument that it's only advanced the wealth of a Black elite, and it gave us the percentage how much their wealth went up. You notice there's nothing about how much did white wealth go up in that period, number one. Number two, there's no mention at all what percentage of the entire economy is still dominated and controlled by Europeans.
Of course not.
So, as I said, the article showed why we need to expand Black economic empowerment.
Yeah.
But even after detailing why we need to expand it, came to the exact opposite conclusion that it is the one that is stifling the growth of jobs. And then it gave some statistic comparing South Africa to OECD countries, as if these OECD countries had apartheid. It's just remarkable and mind-boggling. And then the final point, the very beginning, saying this Black economic empowerment is being questioned. And then as you're reading it, the first thing that comes to mind, okay, who's questioning this, right?
Yep.
The second paragraph
Who's
says,
questioning it?
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump, who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth and has never had to work a day in his life.
I mean, the economists are better sometimes at their propaganda, but this one was the worst produced propaganda.
So there is another part that, sister, you want to go?
Sure. So first and foremost, again, I'm going to tie a lot of things in. For those of you who watch Urban View Mornings on Friday, Lamont King and Dr. Carr had Dr. Sunyata Amin on there, and she's talking about herbs. And I bring that up only because some of the herbs she was talking about have a very calming effect. And in this day and age, I think that for any of us,
that's important. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, for any of us who are paying attention to what's going on, it's going to be very important that we're also taking care of our health. Because when I read these kind of stories, I have to be honest, my blood boils, and I have to remind myself to breathe, to drink some water, to drink some tea, to calm myself down, because this is how these people will send us to early death.
No, absolutely, of course. Yeah. Okay? And they have, and do,
they
actually.
have been. They absolutely have been. So I just want to say that for all of our listeners, like, make sure you're also, as you're taking this in, maybe have some chamomile tea, some passion fruit tea, something that helps to regulate your system, because it's enough to, as the song says, it's enough to make you want to holler. So the subtitle was The Staggering Cost of Black Economic Empowerment. Just let that sit for a second.
Yep.
As opposed to what? So what was the cost, or what is the ongoing cost of not empowering Black people economically?
It deserves a
and is that response. Okay? I mean, that's fine. And like you said, Comrade Milton, you're making the case. You're okay if you're saying, let's say we agree with you that we are too uneducated to play these, to serve in these positions. Although really they're implying we're too stupid, we're too dumb. I mean, the Black man obviously is not capable of anything much besides violence. What is the reason that people in that same society have lacked the education to be able to step into these roles? What is the reason that people have lacked the mentorship and the training that any successful person will tell you that they had to receive to be able to effectively serve in roles? And then the argument is against anything that would help to mitigate centuries of, again, injustice so that you maintain the status quo. So are you arguing?
And you're fine with it. That's the most disturbing thing. You're fine with the status quo.
So you are arguing for these monopolies. You are arguing for women not to be included in economic development.
Yes, because that involves a third payment, as they said. Yeah, remember? Because BEE also wants, in addition to black suppliers, black ownership, include women as well. And the argument is saying, oh, this is adding more cost by including.
Because let's just keep it as white, entitled, dumbass males only. In a country that doesn't belong to them, where they came and with weapons stole the economic abilities and opportunities for other people. So this whole idea of race neutrality, when the very basis of the economic system has always been based on race.
Yeah.
Absolute idiocy, madness, lunacy, name it. And like you pointed out, Comrade Milton, look at the difference between the public and private sector. And again, for me, the question is, how about the people? So when you're saying that income has fallen for 50% of the people, is it because of this program? Are there other reasons? Maybe because Nelson Mandela and co., God bless his soul, drank some of their Kool-Aid and decided not to really fight for economic independence and thinking political independence was enough? And then you bring Trump into the equation. Oh my God, he's so race neutral. That's why he brought the white Afrikaners to the United States and laid out a red carpet for them while he's deporting black and brown people. You all give me a freaking break.
Yeah,
these
mad.
economists and all of these entities that parade themselves as being, what's the word?
Elitist.
No. They're not subjective, right? They are fair
Very
and
objective.
unbiased.
Balance.
My goodness, you guys are reeking with your racism and your elitism.
No, this is one of the most horrible lack of nuance propaganda by the economists. Normally, they do a better job. This was just outright explicit craziness.
What I would say is if they really want to bring about change, let's talk about what are these deals that are being made? Who are the people besides Cyril Ramaphosa? And again, Black folk, we need to pay attention to our complicity in some of these issues
I agree.
as well.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up.
Let's break up the cartels. Let's cap-related party procurement. Let's look at what universal services and labor programs need to be in place for youth and women and tie them to industrial zones.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up because that's another point I also wanted to mention. I forgot. Why are you selling these shares to only, these Black individuals we can count on, maybe our combined hands,
One hand.
right? Why not create like co-ops in all these African communities, co-ops run by those communities, and let them buy shares as well? So now right now, like gold is booming, right? South Africa exports a lot of gold. They would be accruing some of that surplus money.
Yep.
They would be able to, put that into their local schools, add a little more, pay teachers more, put it into their own clinics, but it will be like their own private bank, you see? And it will succeed because they'll always get revenue when the shares are going up. So there's no excuse. You can't say, oh, they're only selecting a handful of Black folk because those Black folk become their spokespersons, you see?
So, and that said, I want to quickly bring up a story since we're talking about redrawing maps. Sister would love the idea of maps. And the final story comes...
Let me go and find my tea.
No, that T is important, by
The
the way.
final story comes from Comrade Milton's favorite newspaper. The New York Times says
Yes.
African Union wants the world to scrub 450-year-old map. Supporters of the campaign says the popular Mercator projection promotes a false view of the continent and its size. That's the Mercator at the top, and the size they want is the equal Earth projection, whatever that means. Africa is roughly 3 times the size of Europe, but you won't know it looking at the world's most popular map, the 16th century Mercator map. Last week, the African Union, a continental group of 55 countries, endorsed a campaign to have the organization around the world replace the Mercator map with alternatives such as 2018 Equal Projection Map, which supporters says accurately reflects the true size of Africa. So, question is, why? Why now?
You want to go or you want me to go?
Well, why now? We have we have a campaign going on right now, right? 2025 theme for the AU is justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. So apparently, and with some other groups like Africa No Filter and Speak Up Africa, they've been pushing to popularize this Equal Earth in Africa, this new map, which I would say is well overdue, because for those who would argue there's no reason to revisit the map, the question is, why was it drawn in the way that it was in the first place?
Right.
Right? So we have this Gerardus Mercator, who was a German cartographer. And this map, this projection, the Mercator projection, was drawn up in 1569.
Thank you.
And at that time, it was as a navigation tool for European explorers. You know, the point was...
Plunderers.
Yes, murderers. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that correction on language. Yes, murderers. Absolutely. Rapists, pillagers, thieves. And the grid preserved angles which made plotting sea routes easier for ships leaving Europe on long voyages to go in and steal. So in other words, this map was designed to serve European maritime expansion at precisely the moment when Europe was entering the age of conquest, the age of colonization, the age of Ma'afa, which they like to call the transatlantic slave trade, but our genocide. And so there was politics behind the size of Europe and the shrinking of Africa and the global South as a whole. It definitely, the idea was to reinforce this Eurocentric worldview,
Correct.
making Europe seem larger than life and powerful, while Africa is peripheral, small, and so on and so forth. And that distortion absolutely fed into the colonial ideology. And it feeds into this notion of the West, Europe and the United States of America and Canada to some extent, being all powerful, being the center of the world and justifying their political and economic domination on us. So I think it's important that we do fight back, that we do ask for, you know what, let me rephrase. We shouldn't have to ask for anything. And that's another point I want to make.
Yeah, good draw.
As the article points out, the AU is backing this, but the AU on even its own website has not changed it. So instead of sitting around and waiting for someone else to co-sign, what if we, our countries, again, I know you're going to tell us we don't even control ourselves, but what if our own countries just said, this is the map? What if Tinubu in Nigeria, the same way he went back to the white woman's anthem for the country, says, hey, from now on, this is the map of the world that we use in all our textbooks and in all of our literature and everything that we do in this country. And what if all the other African countries just did the same, instead of sitting around arguing and asking for permission?
So this campaign looks like a campaign that is actually going to succeed just by the amount of coverage it's getting. And I think the World Bank said in some of the static version of the maps, they've now switched, and then the process of switching the other versions. So when you have these establishment organizations starting to do it, that will give some courage to the African Union as well to do the same thing. And also, by the way, this also shows you the type of fights that the African Union is willing to get involved in. Forget the issue of rendition of people to African countries, right? But then on another note, I had, in the beginning, I didn't think much of it, but now I also am a supporter of this campaign. I read what one of the sisters involved, I think it's in DIA, involved in the campaign said, that perception is very important. And I agree entirely, because that's what we talk about even on this show, the misrepresentation of Africa, the perception to an African. So now I'm fully on board. I embrace it. And I think just watching by the coverage is getting that it's going to succeed. And also has another very good reason that I support it for, because now it shows that Africans, independent of African governments, independent of the AU, can actually take initiative on issues that they know many Africans relate to, and they can get it accomplished. So now we need to focus on some of these issues, right? Issues of human rights, issues of democratic institutions, issue of opposing tyranny. We can't make it individual fights. Like, why should the fight in Cameroon be only
for Cameroonians?
For Cameroonians? No, nonsense. When Paul Biya at 93 says he's going to run again, all of us should adopt this type of campaign as Africans. Denounce it, put pressure on the Western institutions that support him. When Museveni steals an election in January, we should do the same thing. Any other African country where we see any outrage. So this provides us now with an excellent template. And now we have no excuse at all.
Okay.
I do want to take a moment to point out 2 calls of action that Comrade has given us. One is the petition. Can you tell us again where that petition is so people can find it and we can resurrect it? Right.
Okay. So if you go to change.org and you put her name, the judge's name, Sebutinde, Sebutinde, the campaign link should pop up, because you're right. We need to make sure
we need to get on it. Yeah.
And just share that widely. And then the second thing is, you did a whole program, for lack of a better term, exposing what's going on in Cameroon and Beira. And can you also tell people where they can find that? Because people need to watch it and get some more in-depth information on who he is, what he's doing, and how we fight back, whether you are in Cameroon or not.
Absolutely. So I did that on my YouTube page. So if you go to Milton Allimadi on YouTube, you'll find that.
Facebook?
Also on Facebook I did,
Okay.
Milton Allimadi, and also on TikTok. Also on Milton
Oh, you're
Allimadi.
on TikTok?
Well,
Okay.
listen, you know why?
I need to up my game. I am not on TikTok.
Let me tell you why I'm on TikTok. I did a 30-minute presentation. I forget the topic now. And then my sister send me an email from London, said, I'm going to send you something. So, okay, sure. She sent me my presentation that somebody had boiled it down and put it on TikTok. And it boiled it down from 30 minutes to 3 minutes. And it had gone viral. So I said, okay, if this is how you speak to them, I got to be on that platform.
Okay.
I need to up my game. This old lady, there are too many new platforms, but okay.
Yeah. So, one other thing. Yes, Wednesday, the good sister and I will be speaking about Sylvia Wynter on continuing the series of Women and Resistance. So we'll be looking at her writings, her impact on resistance as per our humanity. I mean, she has got so many famous quotes. There's one in particular, no humans involved. So, yes, do come on. That's Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'll be talking about Sylvia Wynter. So that said, sister, any final thoughts?
Yes. While we're talking about issues, I have an amazing guest who's going to be discussing Hurricane Katrina, 20 years later. We have not truly talked about the issues that led up to that disaster and how it can happen again.
Yes, of course.
So join us on Rethinking Freedom on YouTube, 7 a.m. on Mondays.
So Rethinking Freedom, 7
a.m. Central Time. We are going to be talking about Hurricane Katrina and its aftermath, its impact on the Black community 20 years later.
And also you could join the Good Comrade on WBAI Tuesday, What time?
Yes, Tuesday from 3 to 4 p.m. WBAI. If you're not within the Metro or New Jersey or Connecticut, then you can tune in via ubai.org online.
Okay. And that said, we've come to the end of another episode, and hopefully you guys will join us next week. Next week, we'll be reviewing a book to be announced in the course of the week. And yes, no rest for the week. Yes. And from every one of us, it's good luck and have a very fruitful week. Good night and God bless.
Good night.
That's a wrap for this week on the African News Review podcast. We hope you are leaving with a clearer, more truthful picture of Africa. Remember, every story has another side, and we're here to uncover it. Don't forget to join us next Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we continue to challenge the narratives and reclaim Africa's voice. If you've enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep seeing Africa for what it truly is.